The stone chamber erupted with voices, each one sharper than the last, as Althea stood in the center of the sacred hall with her wrists bound in silver chains. The metal burned against her skin, not enough to scar, but enough to remind her that she was powerless here, stripped of dignity and defense. 300 pack members filled the tiered seats carved into the ancient rock, their eyes boring into her like accusations made flesh. The High Council sat elevated on their dais, 5 figures robed in ceremonial black, their faces carved from judgment itself. At the center sat Elder Brennan, his white beard flowing over his chest, his gnarled fingers gripping the armrests of his throne-like chair. To his right, Calista reclined with the satisfied smile of a serpent who'd already tasted victory. Her copper hair braided with silver threads that caught the torchlight, her green eyes glittering with malice, barely concealed beneath a mask of righteousness. Calista had orchestrated this. Everyone knew it, but no one dared speak against her. She was the Alpha King's cousin, born of noble blood, raised in the shadow of the throne itself. And Althea was nothing. An orphan, taken in by the pack out of mercy, given a place among the servants, allowed to scrub floors and carry water and vanish into the background of pack life like mist at sunrise. But 3 days ago, something had changed. 3 days ago, the sacred prophecy stone in the temple courtyard had glowed when Althea walked past it. Just a flicker, just a brief pulse of golden light, but enough. Enough for Calista to see. Enough for Calista to fear. "She deceives you all," Calista declared, rising from her seat with theatrical grace, her crimson gown sweeping across the stone floor. "This servant girl has used dark magic to manipulate the sacred stone, to plant false hope in your hearts, to make you believe she is something she is not." Althea's throat tightened, but she forced herself to stand tall despite the chains, despite the hungry eyes, despite the terror clawing at her chest. She had done nothing wrong. She had touched nothing, manipulated nothing. The stone had simply reacted. Elder Brennan leaned forward, his milky eyes narrowing. "Althea Brennan, you stand accused of heresy against the moon goddess herself. The punishment for such blasphemy is death by silver and fire. How do you answer?" Her voice came out smaller than she wanted, but it didn't shake. "I am innocent, Elder. I have committed no crime. I have lived my life in service to this pack, as I was taught. I have no knowledge of dark magic, no desire to deceive anyone." "Liar," Calista hissed, descending the steps of the dais like a predator closing in on wounded prey. "You expect us to believe the prophecy stone simply chose you? A nobody? A servant with no lineage, no power, no standing whatsoever." She circled Althea slowly, her fingers trailing along the silver chains. "The prophecy speaks of a sacred wolf, blessed by fire and moon, destined to unite the packs and restore balance to our world. That wolf will be of royal blood, pure and powerful." She stopped directly in front of Althea, close enough that her breath ghosted across Althea's face. "You are none of those things." The crowd murmured, a sound like distant thunder, agreement rippling through the chamber. Althea felt it like a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders, threatening to buckle her knees. She wanted to scream that she hadn't asked for the stone to glow, hadn't asked for any of this. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Calista had already decided her fate. "There is a way to prove the truth," Elder Brennan said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. The chamber fell silent. If she is truly blessed, her wolf will show it. If she has manipulated the stone through dark magic, her wolf will be weak, damaged, or worse, absent entirely. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. She will shift. Here, now, before the sacred altar itself. The moon goddess will reveal the truth of her nature. Althea's heart stopped. Shift? Here? She had never shifted in front of the pack before. Servants didn't attend the full moon gatherings, didn't run with the pack during hunts. She had shifted alone, in the woods beyond the pack boundaries, learning to navigate her wolf form in secret, teaching herself what others learned from their families. And her wolf was different. She had always known that. Smaller than most, yes, but there was something else, something she couldn't name, a heat that lived beneath her skin when she transformed, a sensation like standing too close to a bonfire. "Please," Althea whispered, hating the plea even as it left her lips. "I don't know what will happen." "I have never shifted in front of your betters," Calista interrupted, her smile widening. How convenient. How perfectly suspicious. She turned to address the council, her voice rising. She fears the revelation because she knows her wolf is weak, malformed, or perhaps she has no wolf at all. Perhaps she is human, pretending to be one of us, using stolen magic to infiltrate our pack. The crowd erupted again, voices calling for proof, for justice, for blood. Althea felt the words like stones being hurled at her chest, each one leaving a bruise that wouldn't show on her skin but ached in her soul. "Remove the chains," Elder Brennan commanded. 2 guards stepped forward, their faces impassive as they unlocked the silver manacles. The metal fell away with a clatter that echoed in the vast chamber, and Althea rubbed her wrists, feeling the burn marks left behind, angry red welts that would take days to heal. "Approach the altar," Elder Brennan said. Althea's legs felt like water, but she forced them to move, one step and then another, crossing the stone floor toward the massive altar that dominated the far end of the chamber. It was carved from a single piece of obsidian, dark and gleaming, its surface etched with ancient runes that glowed faintly in the torchlight. Generations of Alpha Kings had been crowned before this altar. Countless mating bonds had been blessed here. It was the heart of the pack, the physical manifestation of their connection to the moon goddess herself. And now it would serve as the place of her judgment. Althea stopped 3 feet from the altar, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The entire pack watched her, hundreds of eyes glittering in the shadows, waiting for her to fail, to prove Calista right, to give them permission to rip her apart. "Shift," Elder Brennan ordered, "and may the goddess have mercy on your soul if you have lied." Althea closed her eyes and reached for the wolf that lived beneath her skin. It stirred immediately, eager, pressing against the barrier between human and beast with unusual urgency. She had always felt her wolf as a separate entity, a companion rather than just another part of herself. And now that companion was practically vibrating with anticipation. Something's different, she thought. Something's wrong. But there was no choice. She let the shift take her. Pain exploded through her body, but it wasn't the usual pain of transformation. This was fire, liquid heat pouring through her veins, igniting every nerve ending, setting her blood ablaze. She gasped and fell to her knees as her bones began to crack and reform. But instead of the familiar sensation of shrinking, of her body compressing into the smaller frame of her wolf, she felt herself expanding. The chamber filled with gasps, then shocked silence. Althea's vision blurred, her human sight giving way to the enhanced senses of her wolf. But even through the disorientation, she could feel it. Heat radiating from her body in waves. The temperature in the chamber spiking so fast that the nearest pack members stumbled backward, shielding their faces. When the transformation completed, she stood on 4 legs, panting, her chest heaving. But she wasn't small. She wasn't weak. She was massive. Easily the size of an alpha wolf, her shoulder reaching the height of a grown man's chest. And her fur was the color of flame itself. Deep crimson at the roots, bleeding into orange and gold at the tips, each strand seeming to flicker and dance as though she were made of fire given form. Her eyes, she could feel, glowed with an inner light, amber shot through with veins of molten gold. And the altar, the obsidian altar that had sat dark and cold for decades, suddenly blazed to life. The runes carved into its surface ignited, brilliant white fire racing along every curve and line, ancient symbols burning so bright that pack members cried out and covered their eyes. The flames didn't consume the stone. They danced across it, alive and beautiful and utterly impossible. The sacred altar was responding to her presence, recognizing her, claiming her. Impossible, Calista breathed, her face gone white, all her carefully crafted confidence crumbling like ash. This is dark magic! She's corrupted the altar itself! But even as she spoke, the massive doors at the back of the chamber slammed open with a boom that shook the walls. Every head turned, every breath held, as a figure stepped through the doorway and the crowd parted like water before the prow of a ship. Alpha King Jonathan had arrived. He stood 6.5 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to block the light from the corridor beyond, his presence so commanding that the very air seemed to bend around him. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, framing a face carved from stone and shadow, all sharp angles and fierce beauty. His eyes, silver blue and piercing, swept the chamber once before locking onto the firewolf standing before the blazing altar. He had been away, traveling to the northern packs to negotiate new treaties, and wasn't supposed to return for another week. But here he was, striding into the chamber with the casual authority of someone who had never once doubted his right to command. His black leather jacket pushed back to reveal the tribal tattoos that marked his forearms, the symbols of his bloodline and his power. "What?" Jonathan said, his voice low and deadly calm as he approached the dais, "is happening in my hall?" Elder Brennan stood, bowing his head in deference. "Alpha King, we did not expect your return. We are conducting a trial." "A trial," Jonathan interrupted, his gaze never leaving Althea's wolf form, "that has resulted in the sacred altar igniting for the first time in 200 years. He climbed the steps to the dais, each footfall deliberate, controlled. "A trial where you have apparently forced a pack member to shift before the entire assembly?" He turned to face Elder Brennan, and the older man actually flinched. "Explain. Now." "The servant girl, Althea Brennan, she caused the prophecy stone to glow 3 days ago," Elder Brennan said, his voice losing some of its earlier certainty. "Lady Calista brought evidence that she had been practicing dark magic, attempting to manipulate the sacred objects to claim a destiny not her own." Jonathan's eyes cut to Calista, who suddenly found the floor intensely interesting. "Evidence." "The timing was suspicious," Calista said, lifting her chin with false bravado. A servant girl, with no lineage, no power, suddenly triggering ancient prophecy? It defied logic. It defied what it defied, Jonathan said, moving toward her with predatory grace. Was your ambition. He stopped directly in front of her, towering over her despite her considerable height. You believed the prophecy would point to you. You've believed it since you were a child. And when it didn't, he gestured toward Althea's wolf form, still standing before the burning altar, trembling with the effort of holding the transformation. You decided to destroy the one it did choose. Callista's face flushed crimson, rage and shame warring in her expression. She is nothing! She, Jonathan said, his voice dropping to a register that made the entire room hold its breath, is standing before an altar that hasn't burned in 2 centuries, in a wolf form blessed by the goddess herself, while you spew jealousy disguised as righteousness. He turned away from her, dismissing her as thoroughly as if she'd ceased to exist. Someone explain to me what a firewolf is doing in my pack without my knowledge. The silence was deafening. No one spoke. No one moved. Jonathan's gaze traveled across the council members, the guards, the assembled pack, before finally settling back on Althea. He descended from the dais and approached her slowly, his movements careful, non-threatening. When he was close enough to touch, he knelt on one knee, bringing himself to eye level with her massive wolf form. Shift back, he said quietly, and there was no command in it, no alpha order to force compliance. Please, let me see your human face. Althea hesitated. Her wolf didn't want to release this form, didn't want to surrender the power and the fire and the rightness of it. But the kindness in his voice, the complete absence of judgment or fear, gave her courage. She let the shift take her again, the fire receding her, body shrinking and reforming until she stood on 2 legs, naked and vulnerable and shaking. Someone threw a cloak over her shoulders, one of the guards, his face carefully neutral, and she wrapped it around herself with trembling fingers, suddenly aware of how exposed she was, how every eye in the chamber was trained on her. Jonathan stood as well, still watching her with that intense, unreadable expression. Up close, she could see the small scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his silver blue eyes seemed to look straight through her skin to the soul beneath. How long have you been hiding this? He asked. I didn't know, Althea whispered. I swear, Alpha King. When I shift in the woods, I'm smaller, normal. I've never been that size before, never felt that heat. I don't understand what happened. His expression shifted, something like wonder flickering across his features before he controlled it. The altar, he said. The proximity to the sacred site triggered your true form. You've been suppressing it without realizing, keeping yourself small to survive unnoticed. Althea's breath caught. That made a terrible, perfect sense. She had spent her entire life trying to be invisible, to avoid attention, to never stand out or draw scrutiny. Of course her wolf would adapt, would compress itself, would hide what it truly was to protect her. Elder Brennan, Jonathan said, turning back to the council without taking his eyes off Althea. What does our law say about a wolf blessed by sacred fire? The elderly man cleared his throat, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped his staff. The ancient texts speak of the fire wolves as the moon goddess's chosen warriors. They appear only in times of great need, when the balance between packs threatens to collapse entirely. He paused, consulting a leather-bound tome that one of the attendants had brought forward. A firewolf is marked by the goddess herself, bearing her flame as proof of divine favor. Such a wolf cannot be harmed by silver, cannot be bound by common chains, and carries within their blood the power to unite what has been fractured. And their status within the pack? Elder Brennan swallowed hard. Above all others save the Alpha King himself. They are to be protected, honored, and... He trailed off, his eyes widening as the implications settled over him. And offered the choice of mate bond with the highest-ranking unmated wolf in the pack. The chamber erupted. Voices rose in shock, in disbelief, in outrage. Calista's shriek cut through the noise like a knife. "No! This is impossible! She's a servant! She has no right!" "She has every right," Jonathan said, and the room fell silent, as if he'd physically commanded it. The law is clear. The prophecy is clear. The goddess has made her choice, and I will not permit this pack to spit in the face of divine will because of your wounded pride. He turned back to Althea, and something in his expression had shifted, had opened, had become almost hopeful. "Althea Brennan, the law gives you the choice of mate bond with the highest-ranking unmated wolf in this pack." His lips curved into the faintest smile. "That would be me." Althea's mind went blank. Mate bond. With the Alpha King. With this man who stood before her like legend made flesh. Who had defended her without hesitation. Who looked at her not with fear or suspicion, but with something that made her chest ache and her wolf howl with recognition. I don't understand," she managed. "Why would you want—" She gestured helplessly at herself, at the cloak barely covering her servant's body, at everything she wasn't. Jonathan stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the power that radiated from his skin like a physical force. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with one large hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. "Because the moment I walked into this chamber and saw you standing before that burning altar," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "my wolf recognized you. Because everything in me is screaming that you're mine, that you've always been mine, that I've been waiting my entire life for you to stop hiding and step into the light." His eyes searched hers, vulnerable in a way she suspected he never allowed himself to be in public. "Because I can feel the mate bond pulling at my chest like a hook in my ribs, and if you tell me you don't feel it too, I'll walk away. But I don't think you will." Althea's breath came in short gasps, her heart racing so fast she felt dizzy. The mate bond. She did feel it, had felt it the moment he'd entered the chamber, a golden thread spooling out from her chest toward his, connecting them in ways that transcended logic or reason. She had thought it was fear, adrenaline, the aftermath of the shift, but no, it was him. It was this. "I feel it," she admitted, and watched his expression transform. Watched relief and joy and possessive satisfaction bleed across his features. "But I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer you. I can't—" "You're a firewolf blessed by the goddess herself," he interrupted, his hand sliding back to cradle the nape of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. "You have more right to stand at my side than anyone in this room. And I don't care about your past, about what you were or weren't before this moment. I care about what you are now, what we can be together." He glanced over his shoulder at the assembled pack, his expression hardening into the mask of authority she suspected they were all more familiar with. "Althea Brennan has been chosen by the goddess and claimed by me. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me for the right to lead this pack." His eyes found Calista in the crowd, and his smile turned sharp and dangerous. "I'm waiting." No one moved. No one spoke. Calista looked like she'd been turned to stone, her face twisted in impotent rage. But even she wasn't foolish enough to challenge an alpha king in his prime, especially not one who had just declared a mate bond in front of witnesses. Jonathan turned back to Althea, and his expression softened again, the hard edges melting away. "You don't have to answer now," he said. "This has been overwhelming, I'm sure. But I need you to know that I'm not asking you to be my mate out of obligation or prophecy or divine mandate. I'm asking because I want you. Because my wolf wants you. Because everything in me is telling me that you're exactly where you belong." Althea looked up at him, at this impossible man who had appeared like salvation itself, who had defended her without hesitation, who was offering her not just protection, but partnership, not just status, but belonging. Her entire life she had been invisible, had been nothing, had been alone, and now here was someone seeing her, truly seeing her, and not just accepting what he saw, but celebrating it. The choice should have been difficult. It should have required thought, consideration, careful weighing of consequences. But standing there, in the sacred hall, with the altar still burning behind her and the mate bond singing in her chest, the choice was the easiest thing she'd ever made. "Yes," she said, and watched his eyes flare with triumph. "I choose you. I choose this." Jonathan's smile was devastating, transforming his severe features into something that stole her breath. He pulled her closer, one arm wrapping around her waist to anchor her against his chest, and lowered his head until his forehead rested against hers. "Thank the goddess," he murmured, and then louder, projecting his voice to fill the entire chamber. "Witness the claiming! Althea Brennan, firewolf and chosen of the goddess, is mine, my mate, my equal, and soon, my Luna Queen." The pack erupted again, but this time the sounds were different. Shock giving way to acceptance, to tentative celebration, to the recognition that they were witnessing something that happened once in a generation, if that. The sacred altar's flames pulsed brighter, as if in approval, and Althea felt warmth flood through her body that had nothing to do with her wolf, and everything to do with the bond clicking into place between her soul and Jonathan's. "Elder Brennan," Jonathan said, still holding Althea close, his arm a band of steel around her waist. "Prepare the mating ceremony for tomorrow night. Full moon ritual, every pack member in attendance. I want this done properly, traditionally, with all the weight and honor it deserves." "Yes, Alpha King," Elder Brennan said, bowing deeply. "It will be done." Jonathan nodded, then his gaze hardened as it swept across the council members. "Now, let's address the matter of false accusation and attempted manipulation of pack law." His eyes locked on Calista, who had gone deathly pale. All her earlier bravado evaporated like morning dew. Lady Calista, step forward. For a moment, Althea thought Calista might run. The other woman's eyes darted toward the exits, toward the guards, searching for escape that didn't exist. But finally, with the stiff movements of someone walking toward their own execution, Calista descended from the dais and approached the center of the chamber. "You stand accused of bringing false charges against a pack member," Jonathan said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of alpha law. "Of manipulating sacred law for personal gain. Of attempting to harm one blessed by the goddess herself. Of undermining the stability and unity of this pack through jealousy and ambition." He paused, letting each charge land like a physical blow. "How do you answer these charges?" Callista's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her jaw tight. For a moment, Althea saw the struggle play across her face, the urge to fight, to defend, to lash out, warring with the knowledge that she had already lost. Finally, her shoulders slumped. "I believed the prophecy was meant for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was raised to believe it. My mother told me every day that I was destined for greatness, that the goddess had marked me from birth. When the stone glowed for her, she gestured toward Althea without looking at her. I couldn't accept it. I couldn't let everything I'd believed, everything I'd prepared for, be given to a servant. So you decided to destroy her instead of accepting the goddess's will." Yes. The single word hung in the air like a condemnation. Jonathan's expression didn't change, but Althea felt the tension radiating from his body, the rage he was keeping tightly controlled. "Lady Calista, by your own admission and the evidence of your actions, you are found guilty of all charges. The traditional punishment is exile beyond pack lands, with no possibility of return, no protection of pack law, no claim to family or resources." Callista's head snapped up, genuine fear flooding her features. "Exile? But I'm of royal blood. I'm your cousin. You can't just—" "I can and I will," Jonathan said. "Your blood doesn't give you the right to harm innocent pack members. Your status doesn't place you above the law, and your relationship to me certainly doesn't grant you permission to orchestrate the execution of my mate." He let that last word resonate through the chamber, a clear statement of where his loyalties lay, what his priorities were. Then his expression shifted, became thoughtful. "However, I am not without mercy." He glanced at Althea and something passed between them, a wordless question. She could feel him asking her permission, giving her the power to decide Callista's fate. Althea looked at the woman who had tried to kill her, who had orchestrated this entire nightmare, who had been willing to watch her die to protect her own ambition. She should have wanted revenge, should have wanted to see Calista suffer, to be cast out into the wilderness alone, to experience the kind of powerlessness and terror that Althea had felt standing in this chamber with silver chains burning her wrists. But looking at Calista now, seeing the fear and the bitter regret and the ruins of a lifetime of misplaced belief, Althea found she didn't have the stomach for cruelty. She was better than that. She had survived by being better than that. "Let her stay," Althea said, and felt Jonathan's surprise ripple through their forming bond. "Exile is too harsh. She was wrong and she hurt me. But she was also raised to believe a lie. Her mother poisoned her mind before she was old enough to question it." She looked directly at Calista for the first time, meeting those green eyes that had held so much hatred. "I want her to stay and witness what real strength looks like. I want her to see that power doesn't come from bloodline or status or who your mother was. I want her to learn what I had to learn. That worth is earned, not inherited. Calista stared at her, something complicated and raw flickering across her face. Not gratitude exactly, but perhaps the first stirrings of understanding, of shame that went deeper than just being caught. Jonathan's arm tightened around Althea's waist, a gesture of approval and pride. Very well. Lady Calista, you will not be exiled. However, you are stripped of your title and your position on the council. You will serve the pack as Althea did, working in the kitchens, the stables, the places where real work happens. You will learn humility, or you will leave of your own accord. He paused, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. And if you ever threaten my mate again, in any way, mercy will not be offered twice. Am I understood? Yes, Alpha King. Then get out of my sight. Calista fled, her exit marked by the whispers and murmurs of pack members who had just witnessed the complete collapse of one of their most prominent families. Elder Brennan called for order, for the dispersal of the assembly, and slowly the crowd began to break up, filing out of the chamber in groups, their voices buzzing with speculation and gossip and wonder. Jonathan waited until the room had mostly cleared before he finally loosened his hold on Althea, though he didn't let go entirely. His hand found hers, their fingers lacing together with natural ease, and he led her toward a side exit away from the main doors and the lingering crowd. They walked in silence through corridors Althea had scrubbed 1,000 times, past tapestries she had dusted and repaired, through a part of the pack house she knew intimately from years of service, but had never experienced like this, as someone who belonged, who had a right to be here beyond her labor. Jonathan guided her to a set of carved wooden doors she'd never been allowed beyond and pushed them open to reveal a private chamber that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the forest, the setting sun painting the trees in shades of amber and rose. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, unlit but beautiful, its mantel carved with running wolves and crescent moons. Thick rugs covered the stone floor, and comfortable furniture was arranged to create spaces for conversation, for reading, for quiet contemplation. These are my private quarters, Jonathan said, closing the doors behind them and finally releasing her hand. I brought you here because we need to talk. Really talk. Without an audience or interruption. But if you'd rather go somewhere else, somewhere more neutral— No, Althea said quickly. This is fine. This is perfect. He smiled at that. A real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look younger. Less like an alpha king and more like just a man. Good. I'm glad. He moved to the fireplace and crouched to light the kindling that had been laid there, giving her space, giving her time to process. I need you to understand something. What happened in the hall, the claiming, the mate bond, it's all real. But I also know it happened fast, faster than you had any right to prepare for. So I want to make sure you know that nothing has to happen tonight, or tomorrow, or any time before you're ready. Althea watched him work, watched the firelight begin to catch and grow, casting dancing shadows across his profile. What about the ceremony tomorrow? The ceremony is for the pack. It's tradition, ritual, the public acknowledgement of what the goddess has already decreed. But the private bond, the actual mating— He straightened and turned to face her, his expression serious. That happens when you want it to, not because of prophecy or pressure or duty. When you're ready, when you trust me enough, when it feels right. Something in Althea's chest loosened, a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. He was giving her control, giving her the power to decide the pace of this impossible thing that had been thrust upon her. "Thank you," she said softly. "I do feel the bond. It's like I've been walking around my whole life with something missing, and suddenly it's been given back to me. But you're right, this is fast. This is overwhelming." "I know." He crossed to where she stood and took both her hands in his thumbs rubbing gentle circles against her palms. "I've been Alpha King for 12 years. In that time, I've had dozens of she-wolves presented to me as potential mates. Political matches, strategic alliances, beautiful women from powerful families. And I've turned down every single one of them because they didn't feel right. Because my wolf was waiting for something, for someone. And I trusted that instinct even when the council pressured me to choose." His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. "And then I walked into that chamber and saw you standing there, fire made flesh, brave and terrified and so beautiful it hurt to look at you. And I knew. This was what I'd been waiting for. You were what I'd been waiting for." Althea's breath caught. No one had ever looked at her the way he was looking at her now, like she was precious and powerful and everything he'd ever wanted. "I'm still a servant. I still don't know how to be what you need me to be." "You're not a servant anymore. You're my mate, chosen by the goddess herself. And I don't need you to be anything other than exactly what you are." He released one of her hands to cup her cheek, his palm warm against her skin. "But I can teach you what you need to know. How to navigate pack politics, how to command respect, how to lead beside me. We'll figure it out together." The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction that they could do this, made something inside her shift and settle. She had spent so long being afraid, being small, being invisible. Maybe it was time to be something else. Maybe it was time to step into the destiny the goddess had apparently marked her for. "Okay," she said. "Then let's figure it out together." Jonathan's smile was radiant, joy transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. "Okay," he echoed, and then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, just a soft press of lips against lips, testing, learning. But then Althea's hands found their way to his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath his shirt, and the kiss deepened. His arm wrapped around her waist again, pulling her flesh against him, and she went willingly, eagerly, rising on her toes to meet him halfway. The mate bond flared between them, golden and warm and right, and Althea felt her wolf surge in approval, in recognition, in the bone-deep knowledge that this was exactly where they were supposed to be. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jonathan rested his forehead against hers and laughed, the sound low and pleased and completely unguarded. "The goddess has blessed me," he murmured, "more than I ever deserved." "Don't let the pack hear you admit that. They think you're infallible." "They're about to learn differently. Having a mate who can challenge me, who won't just defer to my authority, that's going to be good for everyone." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then reluctantly stepped back. "You should rest. Tomorrow is going to be long, and there's a lot to prepare. I'll have someone bring you appropriate clothing, show you to a proper room. Can I stay here?" The words came out before she could stop them, but once they were out there, she didn't want to take them back. I'm not asking to. I just don't want to be alone right now. This room is big enough for both of us, And you said nothing has to happen before I'm ready, so... Althea, breathe. He was smiling again, that soft smile that made her chest ache. You can absolutely stay here. I'll take the couch, you can have the bed. I'm not kicking you out of your own bed. I can take the couch. We'll both take the bed then. It's enormous, and I promise to be a perfect gentleman. How's that? Althea felt heat creep into her cheeks but nodded. That sounds good. The next hours passed in a strange, dreamlike quality. Jonathan sent for dinner, which they ate together by the fire, while he told her about the northern pacts, about the treaties he'd negotiated, about the challenges of keeping peace between territories that had been feuding for generations. Althea found herself relaxing, asking questions, even laughing at some of his drier observations about pack politics. When exhaustion finally claimed her, he showed her the bedroom, a massive space dominated by a bed that could have slept 6 people comfortably, and gave her privacy to change into the nightgown that had been delivered, along with racks of clothing appropriate for a future Luna. When she emerged, he was already in bed, his back to her side, reading by lamplight. She slipped under the covers on her side, maintaining a careful distance, but even that small gap felt wrong. The mate bond hummed between them, wanting connection, wanting closeness. After a few minutes of staring at the ceiling, she whispered his name. Yeah? Would you hold me? Just hold me? The book closed with a soft thump. The lamp clicked off, and then he was there, his arm sliding around her waist, pulling her back against his chest, his warmth enveloping her like a shield against the world. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you, and I'm not letting go. Althea's eyes drifted closed, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her back lulling her toward sleep. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. She felt wanted. She felt home. The next day unfolded in a whirlwind of preparation. Jonathan had assigned her a team of attendants, not servants, he'd insisted, but pack members, whose job was to help her transition into her new role. They taught her protocol, etiquette, the proper forms of address for different ranks within the pack. They dressed her in ceremonial robes for the mating ceremony, deep crimson silk embroidered with golden flames, a gown that echoed her wolf form and made her feel like the powerful creature she was still learning to believe she could be. As sunset approached, they led her to the sacred grove where all major pack ceremonies were conducted. The clearing was filled with pack members, hundreds of wolves gathered in their human forms, dressed in their finest clothing, their faces turned expectantly toward the ancient stone circle at the grove's center. Jonathan waited for her there, devastating in formal black leather decorated with silver wolf head clasps, his hair pulled back to reveal the sharp planes of his face. When he saw her approaching, his expression transformed, wonder and desire and possessive pride bleeding across his features in a way that made her stomach flip. Elder Brennan stood between them, holding an ornate chalice filled with ceremonial wine mixed with sacred herbs. We gather under the full moon to witness the joining of Alpha King Jonathan Thorne and Althea Brennan, Firewolf and chosen of the goddess. Their bond has been forged by divine will, recognized by sacred flame, and will be sealed this night by ancient tradition. He turned to Jonathan first. Jonathan Thorne, do you take this woman as your mate, your equal, your Luna Queen? Do you vow to protect, to honor, to stand beside her until the goddess calls you home? I do. Althea Brennan, do you take this man as your mate, your equal, your Alpha King? Do you vow to support, to challenge, to stand beside him until the goddess calls you home?" Althea's voice came out strong and certain. "I do." "Then drink, and let the bond be sealed." Jonathan took the chalice and drank, his eyes never leaving hers. Then he passed it to Althea, and she did the same, the wine warm and sweet and laced with something that made her skin tingle, made her wolf rise to the surface with approval. Witness the mating bond, blessed by the moon goddess herself. Althea Brennan is now Luna Queen, equal in authority, equal in power, equal in all ways to the Alpha King. Let any who would challenge this speak now, or forever hold their peace. Silence. Perfect, absolute silence. And then, as if someone had given a signal, the entire pack erupted in howls, human throats producing the ancient song of celebration, of acceptance, of welcome. The sound rolled through the grove like thunder, filling the air, filling Althea's chest with emotion so powerful she thought she might break apart from it. Jonathan pulled her into his arms and kissed her in front of everyone, claiming her publicly and thoroughly, and the howls intensified, joy and approval radiating from every pack member present. When they finally broke apart, he turned her to face the crowd, his arm around her waist, presenting her. "You're Luna Queen," he declared. "Treat her as you would treat me. Protect her as you would protect your own lives. She is pack. She is family. She is sacred." The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. Pack members approached her one by one to offer congratulations, to pledge their loyalty, to welcome her into the family she had served but never truly belonged to. Althea shook hands, accepted blessings, smiled until her face ached, all while Jonathan remained at her side like an anchor, steady and proud. And Calista, wearing simple servant's clothes, approached near the end of the night and bowed her head. "Luna Queen, I wanted to apologize, truly apologize, not just for what I did, but for why I did it. You showed me mercy when I deserved none. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I will spend every day trying to earn the second chance you gave me." Althea looked at the woman who had once seemed so powerful, so untouchable, now humbled and genuine in her remorse. "Then we start fresh," Althea said. "No more grudges, no more bitterness. Just pack." Callista's eyes glistened with tears. "Thank you, Luna." When the last guest had departed and the grove stood empty save for her and Jonathan, he took her hand and led her back toward the pack house. But instead of heading to their quarters, he guided her to the sacred hall, to the obsidian altar that still bore the faint glow of the previous day's fire. "I wanted to bring you here one more time," he said, "to show you something." He pulled a small leather journal from his jacket pocket, its pages yellowed with age. "This is the original prophecy, the one that's been passed down through Alpha bloodlines for 200 years. He opened it to a marked page and held it so she could see. The writing was archaic but legible. "In the time of greatest division, when packs war against packs and blood runs thick in the forest, the goddess will send her champion. A wolf of sacred fire, marked by flame and blessed by moonlight, will rise from nothing to stand beside the king. Together they will heal what has been broken, unite what has been scattered, and bring peace to the children of the moon." Althea stared at the words. at the prophecy that had shaped her entire life without her knowledge. "From nothing," she whispered. "That's why I had to be a servant, why I couldn't have been born to power or status. The prophecy required it." "The goddess works in mysterious ways," Jonathan agreed. "She brought you to this pack as a child, kept you hidden and safe until the moment was right, and then revealed you in a way that no one could deny or question." He closed the journal and set it aside, then took both her hands in his. "And I am grateful for every day you spent in obscurity, because it made you who you are now. Strong, compassionate, resilient, the perfect Luna Queen, the perfect mate." Althea felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I was so scared yesterday, when they forced me to shift, when I thought they were going to kill me." "Never," Jonathan interrupted, pulling her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like bands of iron. "Never again will you face anything alone. Never again will you be afraid. I swear it on my life, on my pack, on everything I am. You are mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to love." She looked up at him, at this man who had claimed her body and soul, who had given her everything she'd never dared to dream of. "And you are mine. Always." He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise, and the sacred altar behind them pulsed with light one final time, the goddess herself blessing what had been forged in fire and fate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The packs were still divided, still warring, still bleeding. There would be treaties to negotiate, enemies to face, battles to fight. But standing there in the sacred hall, with her mate's arms around her, and the goddess's approval warming her skin, Althea knew they would face it all together. She was no longer nothing. She was no longer alone. She was Luna Queen, Fire Wolf, chosen and blessed and loved. She was exactly where she belonged. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell us which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Shout out to our friends from Milan, New Mexico, Kansas, Texas, Xenia, Ohio, Western North Carolina, Massachusetts, Queensland, Australia, Lewis, Scotland, Central Florida, San Jose, California, and more. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching.